In the shadow of the Colorado Rockies, nestled in an isolated valley, stood the weathered yet proud structure of Ash Willow Ranch, built from heavy timber and love. The house had once been a symbol of promise for Eliza Carter and her husband Thomas, but over the years the promise had dimmed into silence and creaking floorboards. Eliza was no stranger to hardship. Raised on a farm in Kansas, she knew the meaning of work, of sacrifice. When she married Thomas and moved west, she had dreams of laughter-filled nights and children playing under mountain skies, but Thomas had grown quiet, distant. War had changed him, and perhaps time had changed her too. Their son Jonah, just turned 7, a quiet, bright-eyed boy, he was the light in Eliza's life, but lately Jonah had been acting strange. "Mama," he whispered one night, tugging her sleeve, "there's a man in my room." Eliza blinked. "What kind of man?" "He wears black, his boots don't make a sound, and he watches me sleep." She tried to assure him it was a dream, but unease curled in her stomach like a coiled snake. That night she sat beside Jonah's bed, the oil lamp casting flickering shadows on the walls. Nothing happened, no sound, no movement, just the whisper of wind against the window. But when she woke the next morning, the little carved horse she'd placed on Jonah's shelf was on the floor, upright, facing the door. More nights passed and Jonah's fear grew. He would wake crying, trembling, always insisting the man had been there again. Eliza asked Thomas for help, but he brushed it off with a grunt. Boys got too much imagination. But Eliza felt it, the weight in the air, the cold spots, the sound of boots in the hall when no one was there. Something was wrong. One afternoon while cleaning, Eliza found an old wooden board in Jonah's room that creaked differently. It was loose, beneath it dust and something else, a small ribbon, old and faded, tied in a neat bow, not Jonah's, not hers. The house had secrets, she could feel it, and at night those secrets whispered. 3 weeks passed. The presence in Jonah's room grew stronger. Toys moved, the dog refused to enter, and Jonah spoke of whispered voices and dreams of fire. Then one dusky evening, a man rode into their lives. His name was Caleb Hawthorne, dusty boots, a scar across his jaw, and eyes that spoke of long miles and lost dreams. He asked for work, and Thomas, indifferent to the ranch and his own family, agreed. Caleb was kind to Jonah. He taught him how to tie knots, how to track deer. Eliza watched from the porch, heart confused. There was a gentleness in Caleb she hadn't felt in years, but there was guilt too, a weight she carried daily. One evening Jonah said something that froze her blood. "Mama, the man in my room doesn't like Caleb. He says Caleb is hiding something." That night the oil lamp burst into flame, no explanation, just fire, fear, and the heavy sense that something, was watching. Caleb noticed the fear in Eliza's eyes. He stayed late that evening, keeping watch with her in Jonah's room. "You believe him?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know what to believe, but something's not right." Caleb shared stories of his past. He'd once owned land, he said, not far from here, lost it in a cruel twist of fate. He spoke with a sorrow that pulled out Eliza's heart, and in the quiet between them something grew. A trust, a flicker of warmth that neither dared name. Jonah grew more attached to Caleb, yet more frightened. At night he drew pictures of a tall man in a black coat, eyes like fire. One picture showed the man pointing at Caleb, another showed fire engulfing the house. "He says, you're not supposed to be here," Jonah whispered. Caleb paled, haunted by fear and curiosity. Eliza searched the house. In the attic she found a box of letters hidden away behind a beam. They were from a woman named Margaret, and they weren't addressed to Thomas, they were to Caleb. The truth unraveled like a storm. Caleb had once lived on this land. Margaret was his wife. She died in childbirth in the very room Jonah now slept in. Betrayed by Thomas, who had taken the land through deceit, Caleb left only to return years later under the guise of a drifter. But Margaret's spirit had never left. She had watched, waited, and now reached through the veil to protect her son's namesake, Jonah, who bore the name of the child she lost. Eliza confronted Caleb. He confessed everything, but there was no malice in him, only pain. "I never meant to hurt you, Eliza. I didn't know Jonah slept there. I didn't know she'd still be here." And in the floorboards beneath Jonah's bed, they found a locket inside a miniature portrait of Margaret and a baby. Eliza's emotions turned, betrayal, sadness, and yet understanding. Thomas had lied to her. Caleb had lost everything. That night Jonah sleepwalked to the hallway. He stood facing Margaret's old room and whispered, "Mama, she's crying. She wants her baby." They buried the locket under the old willow tree where Margaret used to sit. Caleb carved her name in a stone and set it above, and for a moment the air on the ranch seemed to breathe easier. That night the house groaned with fury. Doors slammed, the wind howled, Jonah screamed in his sleep. The visitor was no longer passive. Eliza and Caleb stood watch. Thomas, drunk and disinterested, locked himself in the barn. Margaret's spirit grew violent, forcing them to acknowledge her pain. "She needs peace," Caleb said. "We have to give her what she never had." In the quietest hour of the night, Eliza brought Jonah into her arms. Together they placed the locket on the bed. Caleb spoke soft words to the wind, an apology from the depths of his soul. The air stilled, the temperature dropped, then warmth, a final whisper, "Thank you." The next day Thomas was gone. Whether it was shame or fear that drove him, Eliza never knew, but she didn't weep. Eliza and Caleb didn't fall into each other's arms, not immediately. Love, real love, takes time to bloom after ruin. But they rebuilt, one stone, one smile at a time. They turned Ash Willow Ranch into a home again. Jonah laughed more, the house stood lighter, the shadows less menacing, and Jonah never saw the visitor again. But sometimes, when the wind was just right, they heard a soft lullaby drifting down the hall, as if someone was finally rocking her child to sleep.